Hello, I'm here to read another chapter from my book, Fighting for Your Destiny. Chapter 9, Witchcraft in the Family. I'm just going to read a few verses from Genesis chapter 30. And Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said unto her, Is it a small matter that you've taken my husband? And wouldest thou now take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, Thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee for my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the fifth son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the sixth son. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun, and afterwards she bare a daughter, and called her name Dinah. Many people living in the West cannot make much sense of this story. What does the mandrake have to do with pregnancy? Since ancient times, it's been used in recipes as an aphrodisiac and as an aid for impotency, to induce visions and free the spirit, to calm down nerves and to sedate patients in pain with severe wounds, and to assist with rheumatisms. Of course, it has also been used extensively in magic. A word of caution though, it's poisonous and internal consumption is not recommended. At higher doses, this plant can cause delirium, madness and even death, and it has to be respected in all ways. The mandrake root was consumed in very small amounts, cut into an amulet to wear on the body or put beneath the bed. Mandrakes have unusually large, forked roots that sometimes resemble a human body with open arms and legs, and is widely used in witchcraft. Mandrake has a long and frequently bifid taproot, whose shape sometimes resembles the body of a man, and have gender. And if they find one that looks like a male, then it is more precious. These are named love apples in Bible dictionaries, but they actually are used to bring sexual desire and fertility. In early peoples, the mandrake was associated with the superstitious belief that it promoted fertility and conception in barren women. Believing this to indicate reproductive power, our ancestors took to sleeping with them under their pillows at night. The Genesis story revealed that Rachel and Leah believed that mandrakes promoted conception. For Reuben to find this plant, he needed to know what it actually was, and this must have been so much more important for Rachel than just spending another night with Jacob. And it was after that night that Leah started having children again. At this time, Jacob spent his nights with Rachel, knowing she wanted children. Both Leah and Rachel wanted children. Rachel wanted children to validate herself as a woman. Rachel was so desperate to have children that she was willing to have Jacob spend a night with Leah to get possession of the mandrakes. We're not told whether Jacob believed that mandrakes promoted fertility, but Rachel certainly did, because she didn't know Jacob's God. From reading the account of what happened in the scripture, we find that obtaining the mandrake did not help Rachel one little bit, but Leah had 3 more children without them. Rachel could not manipulate her fertility by believing in the superstitious power of a plant. For 6 long years, Rachel suffered humiliation. In the beginning, she'd imagined marriage with Jacob as the perfect state to be in. 1 man, 1 woman, with lots of little children to follow. Not for one moment did she envisage her sister taking her place on her wedding day, herself becoming the second wife a week later. Neither has she anticipated that both Leah's and her own handmaid would also share her husband's bed and have the pleasure of giving him children. Laban's house was now filled with the laughter of his 11 noisy grandchildren. Jacob was fulfilled being a father to his boisterous brood. Leah and both handmaids all took delight in sharing and comparing mother's stories, whilst Rachel remained just a wife. What a mess. How this situation has escalated out of control. What a stigma to carry around for all these years. It was God who gave Rachel fertility after she prayed to him. We do not know if Rachel's fertility would have occurred earlier if her husband, God's chosen man and the son of the patriarch Abraham, would have prayed for her. We simply know that when Rachel finally turned to God, God responded by granting Rachel's request for a son. What a son she received. Rachel's first son was Joseph, one of the greatest men in the Bible, whose life is an example for every Jew and Christian. Genesis 30. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her, and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. What a relief it must have been for this poor woman to be remembered by God. She only had one child, but this was a really big deal. Her shame was removed instantly. She had produced a son for her beloved husband and was no longer inferior to the other women in his life. Jacob witnessed the fact that God had healed his wife after all her distress. This was the child he had wanted all along. This child was special. When desiring to marry her in the first place, he must have dreamt of their unity and the blessed children who would follow. He'd only wanted one woman, like his father and grandfather before him, but he had been tricked into being a husband of 3 other women, whom his spirit was not at one with. What a delightful day for Jacob to hear the cries of this child, to see the radiant smile on Rachel's face, to know that her sorrow had passed and she was fulfilled, especially at this time when the 7 extra years' dowry was at long last paid in full. He certainly had something to show his family for all the time he had spent away. They would be so blessed to see how fruitful he had been during these past 14 years. One delighted man entered his father-in-law's dwelling to inform him of his intention to return to his own family and country. All he needed to sort out now was his wages for all his service. Genesis 30. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place, and to mine own country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favour in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. And he said, appoint me your wages, and I will give it. And Jacob said unto him, you know how I have served you, and how thy cattle was with me, for it was little which thou had before I came, and it is now increased into a multitude. And the Lord has blessed you since my coming. And now, when shall I provide for mine own house also? And Laban said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your flock. I will pass through all your flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, thus shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And Laban removed that day the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them unto the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Laban knew that Jacob had made a massive difference to his business since he started working for him. He had little when Jacob came, but now he had a multitude of cattle, and Jacob had made him wealthy. Instead of appreciating all that Jacob had done for him and send him away with a blessing, he contrived another plan to make sure Jacob was unable to support himself and his large family on their journey back to Canaan. He had made a verbal agreement with Jacob to give him all the speckled and spotted and ring-streaked animals among the flocks, but he deceitfully went behind Jacob's back and together with his sons removed those specific animals to graze in fields 3 days' journey away. He was determined that Jacob would not leave. But God was with Jacob, even though the treatment he was receiving was very harsh. Jacob has manipulated his brother when he made the deal to buy the birthright for a meal. Laban was used to manipulate Jacob into an extra 7 years of labour to get the woman he really wanted. Jacob had cheated his brother out of the blessing from his father. Well, Laban was now being used to cheat Jacob out of his hard-earned wages. Don't think for one moment that God lets his children get away with sin. No, we need to learn our lessons, and very often the learning process takes a very long time, in many cases years, to make sure we have thoroughly been so sickened by the consequences that we never again want to go down that path. Again, I'm speaking from experience, and I'm so glad God deals with us this way, because when he's finished his work in us, we are totally immunized against the temptation to sin in those particular ways again. God revealed to Jacob what he should do to earn his wages, and this divine strategy was so effective that Jacob ended up with bigger, stronger flocks than his father-in-law. During the next years, Jacob suffered at the hands of Laban, who tried his best to rob Jacob by changing his wages 10 times. But eventually, after another 6 years, God finally gave him permission to leave. Jacob had been with Laban for a total of 20 years. That's what I call serving a hard sentence, or hard labour in prison terms, to pay for his sins. We will never walk in newness of life until the old man has been dealt with. To get away from Laban, Jacob had to do a moonlight. In other words, he had to go when Laban was occupied with business miles from home, with no notion of what he was intending to do. Otherwise, he would have been hindered yet again. Rachel and Leah were more than willing to leave their beloved father, even expressing the fact that they were not under any illusion that they meant anything to him, as he had just used them for his own ends, to keep Jacob working for him as long as he possibly could. I don't think they ever forgave him for his treachery surrounding their marriages. Rachel had been robbed of having first and only place in her husband's life, and Leah had been given to a man who didn't love her and knew that he was just fulfilling his obligations and duty as a husband when with her. It was abundantly clear to Leah that Rachel's relationship with Jacob was totally different to hers, and both sisters envied each other for different reasons. And all this had been brought about by their greedy, covetous father. No, there was certainly no love lost between father and daughters in this family. Jacob made as much headway as he possibly could, but it was quite an ordeal travelling with 4 wives, 12 small children. That's 11 sons plus 1 daughter, all aged between 6 and 13 years of age. His servants and the massive wealth of animals he had accumulated while serving his sentence in Laban's camp also with him. He knew that Laban would be furious when he found out what he'd done, and tried to put as much distance as he possibly could between them, but progress was slow. Laban was informed of Jacob's actions after only 3 days, and consumed with rage followed in hot pursuit for the next 7 days together with the rest of his family until he caught up. Genesis 31. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, that you have stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and didn't tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs, with tabrets and with harps, and have not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in doing so. Is it not in my power to hurt you? But the God of your father spoke unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. It's amazing how the tongue can speak sweet, honeyed words when all the time a person's spirit is raging inside. Jacob was no fool and would not trust this man. He'd served his time, given far more years than he'd initially intended, made him wealthy, but then been aggressively hindered so many times from going back home to his family. He knew Laban would have no pangs of conscience to forcibly rob him, even now, of his daughters, and must have been so relieved to hear Laban say that God himself had intervened and warned Laban to take care when talking with him. As far as he was concerned, his talk of stealing his gods was just another ploy to make them all return. But Rachel was just as bad as her father. Well, it's obvious really, isn't it? They were all injected with the same DNA. Why expect that Rachel would be good if her father was such a rotten apple? Why expect Jacob to be perfect when his mother was the sister of Laban? They all had the same DNA running through them. What chance did any of them have? Rachel was so mad at what her father had done to her that she contrived a way to really and truly hurt him. She knew that Leah and herself held no place in his heart. This man only had room for himself and his gods. Yes, he was an idol worshipper and full of superstition. But so was Rachel. She actually sold her husband for a period to buy the magic mandrakes from her sister, which she believed would enable her to conceive. When they made their escape, she had stealthily stolen all his gods and left with them. She wanted to hurt him, yes, but she also wanted to ensure future conceptions. When she heard the raucous and heated conversation going on between her father and Jacob, she had acted quickly. Genesis 31. Now, Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. Wow, she was one tricky woman, and could be just like her father. After hiding the idols in the camel's furniture and sitting on top of it, she pretended to be on her monthly menstrual cycle because she knew that at this particular time she would be safe. Considering her to be unclean, nobody would want to defile themselves by touching her or anything she was sitting upon. Rachel looked the picture of innocence as the men rummaged around, her lies totally undetected, and her scheme worked. She got away with it. Make no mistake, a massive confrontation was taking place between Jacob and Laban. Jacob's frustration and resentment poured out as he exposed Laban's attitude. This man was not worthy of them. During his 20 years of oppression, Jacob had at last grown up. He was no longer the mummy's little boy who could be manipulated and cajoled. He was a man in his own right and was now standing up to Laban and fighting lawfully to protect himself and his family. God had done a great work in Jacob's life. Genesis 31. Jacob was wroth, and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said unto Laban, What is my trespass? What is my sin, that you've so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and my brethren, that they may judge betwixt both of us. This 20 years have I been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats have not cast their young, and your rams and of your flocks have I not eaten. That which was torn by beasts I brought not unto you. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst you require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day, the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in your house. I've served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your cattle, and you've changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, had been with me, surely you'd have sent me away now empty. God has seen mine affliction and the labour of my hands, and rebuked you yesternight. There's one thing we must never forget. If God has called a man or a woman, then he marks his own. God deals with each of his children as he sees fit, because we all have different characters and personalities. We all get individual treatment. Jacob may have often felt he was on his own in a strange land, but God was not only watching over everything, God was initiating everything, because he wanted to make a new man out of Jacob. At last, Jacob felt as though he had someone on his side. After all the years of abuse and violation he had experienced at the hand of Laban, God was now saying, Enough! Jacob had served his sentence, paid his dues, and as far as God was concerned, it was time to build this broken man and make something of value out of him, which would bring glory and honour to himself. Yes, there comes a day in our lives, if we have allowed God freedom to do what is necessary to rid us of our pride, self-worth and rebellion, that things begin to change and the tables are turned. He will only allow our oppressors to do their work for as long as it suits his purposes, and after that, he steps in, and they no longer have access in our lives or circumstances. This was now the time to cut off Laban's hold over Jacob. God was setting him free. Laban was now the one to go back home yelping. He had lost his best worker, his 2 daughters, and all his grandchildren, plus a multitude of his animals. But worst of all, his precious false gods. Now, what was he supposed to do? There was no other way around this problem than to make a covenant between themselves that they would not meet again in the future for harm. In Laban's own words, he made a promise using everything sacred he could think of. Genesis 31. The Lord watch between me and thee, when we are absent from one another. If you shall afflict my daughters, or if you shall take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness between me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Amen.